Da, 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 on, and that's lower third.
Okay. Welcome everyone to Free Thought Blog's Conscience. This is FtBCon3, the third such event that we've put on. It is 9 p.m. Central Time, Friday, January 23rd. This is our first night of our con. We run through the weekend. And this is the Asexual-Spectrum Atheists panel. I will be taking questions for the panelists via the chat room, the IRC chat room for Anguilla, which is accessible by going to tinyurl.com/FtBcon. I'm going to turn off my camera and microphone now, and I will let the panelists introduce themselves. Take it away.
All right. My name is Tristan, and I'm sort of the moderator, but also a panelist for this panel. So I should first define some terms before we really get started. So asexual means a person who does not experience sexual attraction to other people. And this panel is called Asexual-Spectrum Atheists because there's an asexual spectrum, which includes people who are between asexual and non-asexual, such as gray A people and demisexuals. Demisexual is a little more specific in that it means somebody who experiences sexual attraction after perhaps a long, close relationship or something of that sort. So without further ado, we should introduce all the panelists. So maybe I should start. So my name is Tristan, as I said before. I often go on the internet as Siggy. I blog at the Asexual Agenda, and I have a personal blog called Skeptics Play. And so I'm a PhD student in physics, and also my religious background. I grew up very liberal Catholic. I went to a Catholic high school, a Jesuit high school, and then I basically stopped believing in all that at the end of high school and started identifying as an atheist. Mostly for because I didn't find the philosophical argument convincing. And let's see. So maybe we could just go on and everybody could explain who they are and their religious background. So going with Mazakine.
Hello, I'm Mazakine. I often go by Cerberus online, pretty much everywhere, and I write for the humor blog sadlyno, sadlyno.com. My identifiers are a long list. I identify as a panromantic asexual. I identify as a trans woman. I identify as kinky. I identify as a feminist. I identify as polyamorous. I identify as a slut for political purposes. I am even kind of a gender by gender performance, i.e., masculinity, femininity don't really sit well with me. So yeah, my religious background is that I was raised by a Wiccan pagan who raised me extremely secularly. And the first time I was taken to a church was by a friend of mine when I was like 5 or 6. And the pastor had this, the pastor of the youth group had this statement about the only people who are going to heaven are people who follow the words of Jesus Christ, and anyone who's anyone's an atheist is going to hell. And it's like this struck my 5-year-old self as like the most deeply unfair thing. It's like no, that can't be how it works. Religion's stupid. And yeah, I've never really found much tract with religion ever since.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Liu. I blog at Prismatic Entanglements. My blog used to be called Shades of Grey, but obviously I had to change the name. Lately, I'm not blogging so much because I'm focusing on writing a memoir. And I'll get into more about what that's about a little later on in the panel. Anyway, my religious background is that I was raised in a fundamentalist, hyper-conservative, abusive Christian household. And so that pretty much made me reject Christianity. And I went through a process of trying to make religion work, which I posted about yesterday on my blog, which if anybody wants to read it. And eventually I became identified as an atheist, and I guess that's about it.
Psychiatrics?
Okay. Hi, I'm Erin. I also go by Psychiatrics on the internet. I also blog with Tristan over at the Asexual Agenda, and before that I blogged at Right with Factor X. I identify as asexual, and the rest is complicated. With respect to my religious background, I was also raised Catholic, but I was not raised particularly liberal Catholic. And in fact, my parents are pretty conservative. Sunday every Mass every Sunday, that kind of thing, CCD and all of that. It didn't really sink in super well for me. I was sort of in the back of my mind going, okay, but you don't believe in this, right? And would occasionally argue with the teachers at CCD, that kind of thing. Went through a phase where briefly about 12 to 13 I went, maybe I should try the whole being like a good Christian girl thing, grew my hair out, and tried going to church regularly, like without fighting, and that did not actually work out very well for me. So at about 14, I basically went, you know what, fuck this. I'm definitely an atheist. This stuff is crazy. And also weirdly historically blindsided. So yeah, that did not go over super well, but I'll talk about that later on.
All right.
And that's it.
Yeah. So next, we have to basically clear out some misconceptions. It's like a mandatory for any ACE panel. So by the way, I say the word ACE. That's often, I can't help it. It's like short for asexual spectrum. So that's what ACE means in this panel. So we're going to take turns going through some misconceptions. Elizabeth?
Okay, so first of all, asexuality is not any kind of sexual dysfunction. Generally speaking, you should assume that if you're talking to an asexual person, the plumbing all works fine, although you can also have a sexual dysfunction and be asexual. It's not about the sexual choices that you make. It's not celibacy. And it's not necessarily about your feelings about sex. You can feel averse to having sex, or you can actually desire to have sex. Or you can feel both, like me. I kind of fluctuate between the two, although I haven't been interested in quite some time. There's sort of, you kind of have to need a reason to opt in to having sex. And asexuality doesn't mean that you don't have other kinds of attraction, which I think transitions into what Psychiatrix is going to talk about.
Yes. So, bouncing off of that note, the thing that I would like everybody to keep in mind is that asexuals are not cold, unfeeling robots. There's this popular concept in the ace community called romantic orientation. What that means is that there are a lot of asexual people and gray A people who fall in love, who get crushes, who want to wind up in romantic relationships the same as non-asexual people do. And there's often a gender bias to the types of people that asexuals will get crushes on. So you have asexuals who will identify as something like heteroromantic asexual, or you will have asexuals who identify as panromantic or biromantic or homoromantic, specifying that these are the people that they want to date, basically. There are also people who identify as aromantic, meaning that they don't experience romantic attraction, they don't necessarily want to date people, or they find the whole dating thing confusing. And again, they are not robots. They have feelings. They make friendships. They have strong family ties sometimes. I mean, as much as any of us have strong family ties, you know? They are actual human people. This is something that gets lost in the shuffle relatively frequently, and I kind of want to hammer that point home. There are also some of us who find romantic attraction a little bit confusing, and so it's not necessarily super clear-cut, right? But yes, this is an important concept to have in the back of your mind when you're dealing with asexual people and other people on the asexual spectrum. Mazuki?
Yeah, sort of bouncing off of that, yes, we can fall in love. It also, asexuality is a sexuality. It does not have anything to do with one's gender identity. I identify as a trans woman. That means that my gender identity doesn't happen to conform to what a doctor thought looking 5 seconds at my genitals and going, well, let's just tick the M box, why not? Which is what is sort of your sex assigned at birth. So yeah, but asexuals can be cisgendered, meaning their gender identity conforms to what that box was checked off as. They can be anywhere on the trans spectrum. And yeah, it doesn't mean that we lack a gender identity to go along with our asexuality. You know, people who don't identify as either gender are called agender. They may or may not be asexual, depending on anything else. And there's some weird views that also come in it where, especially for trans women who are ace, like me, there's this sort of belief of, well, you're on this spironolactone and the estrogens, so clearly that robbed you of your sex drive, and now that's what made you asexual. And it's like, no, I was totally asexual when I thought I was a dude, and still asexual now. And trans male friends I know who have been asexual, they're still asexual, even when they're on T. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so now I want to move on to, so why should this audience care? Given that probably many people in the audience are not ace. Okay, so I have some data to show actually, because I've volunteer, and so they did this. So they did this survey last October or November or something, and they surveyed about 10,000 aces in the online community. So this is not representative of aces in general, just people in the online community. And okay, can you all see that? Yeah.
No.
Wait.
No.
No. Let me try again.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the Avon census.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this census with 10,000 people in the online ACE community, and as you can see, there are like 27% atheists, 21% agnostic, and 10% otherwise non-religious. So all in all, that makes what for 58% who are non-religious in some way. So that's a huge deal. Huge number of people in the online ACE community, not necessarily all ACEs in general. And we don't really know why that is, but that's something to think about. Another thing to show is here at FtBCon, we care a lot about gender. So here's a plot of the gender in the ACE community. And actually it's majority women for some reason. And if we sort of bundle all the non-binary genders together, all the people who are neither men nor women, that actually makes 26%, and the men are actually the smallest group. So I'm very used to doing these panels where I'm the only man, and you know, that's just because of the numbers, basically. And you can also see that there are a lot of trans people. Not all of the non-binary people identify as trans. So that's one reason to care, is just because of the numbers. but I'd like to open up the question to the other panelists. Anybody would like to go? Ezzy?
Yeah, I'll start. I think the biggest reason why atheists should care is because we exist. Asexuals exist in the world. I am not actually a ghost haunting your TV screen. And that's kind of a big deal if you're a community that prides itself on being aware of things that are real and exist. You can't really be a community that believes that and just be like, well, those people aren't real. Like, that doesn't work. And the other big reason is that asexuals, unfortunately, are heavily impacted by sexual violence. A lot of asexuals experience sexual violence, usually through coercion by romantic partners, and unfortunately, in much the same way as lesbian women and trans people of all different identities have had to suffer through, asexuals are targeted for corrective rape. There's people who want to go and fix the asexuals by any means necessary, and this is a real and horrific practice that we in the atheist community, especially those of us who are more feministly identified, need to stop. So yeah, that's why you should care.
Okay, I should give a note going forward that we may talk about sexual coercion and sexual violence in this panel. So
related trigger warning.
Content. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Elizabeth?
Well, we are definitely heavily impacted by sexual violence. I myself am a survivor of a corrective rape. And it's just sort of like, I think that a lot of perpetrators do not even realize that what they're doing is wrong because they think that they are helping the situation because, of course, everybody should have sex and, you're just not a complete person if you don't. So there's this sort of social grooming that happens where we are told that we're wrong and broken and that we need to have sex in order to just be happy, I guess. And I think that somebody said this earlier on tonight, that if you, in a case where abuse is happening, don't take sides, you're actually taking sides with the aggressor. And I think that's very true. So I think that we need to make the community a space where that sort of grooming is recognized and challenged. And the other thing is that for asexual people, our support network is frequently very limited because, people just don't understand us. And I don't just mean friends, I mean also, like, we can't find therapists most of the time who do understand and can help us. I'm fortunate enough to have one right now who's very good about that, but most people aren't. So, and the last thing I want to say is we're already a part of the community, but if it's unwelcoming to us, we'll withdraw and not contribute. So.
Okay. Erin?
Yeah, so the biggest argument that I have as to why the atheist community should care about asexuals and asexual perspectives is that I often think that atheist communities think of asexuals as what religious people want people to be, right? There's this perception that because some religions, say Catholicism among them, values celibacy, that asexuals are what those religious traditions actually want, and that those religions would really be welcoming and be encouraging other people to at least act asexually if they aren't. And that's just not true. For one thing, the thing that I think is often missed by a lot of atheists, particularly those who aren't familiar with the history of these religions, is that celibacy is really only valued because it's denying something that you yourself want, right? It's supposed to be about self-denial. It's supposed to be about self-flagellation. It's supposed to be about being hungry, effectively. Somebody like me who wanders in and goes, so that thing that you keep talking about as like necessary to life and all that and super hard to restrict yourself about, but you're doing it as like a sacrament and a gift to God, I don't want it. Generally speaking, those people tend to be offended by asexual people coming in and being honest about what they are. It's also worth noting that many asexual people do not act heterosexual enough for strictly religious groups, right? Basically, is anybody on here straight enough to be a conservative religious person happy? Anyone? I'm just saying, I think, yeah. I believe we're all in same-gender relationships, or at least not even, yeah. Anyway, so that's another thing that's going on that I think often gets missed. But even if you're not actively gay-ish, like even if you're an aromantic asexual, my experience is that if you're not getting married or dedicating your sexuality to Jesus, most Christian religious traditions are really freaking uncomfortable with that, and will often target asexual people with the same aggression that they often do other minority sexualities. So yeah, that's why I think atheists should care and should listen, because the experience of asexuals provides some nuance about the cultural realities that some of us have to deal with from religion.
Thank you, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on, I want to fill out a little more like what the asexual experience is like. Oh, what?
Should we answer the question from the chat?
Oh, yeah, we can answer that now if we like. So there's a question from the chat. Should I class myself as asexual if I'm interested but don't actually do anything to have sex?
I don't think we have enough information to answer that question.
Yeah.
Define interested, define don't actually do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. To be clear, we're not asking for more information. I think
the panel derails into.
we are not sexuality sorcerers. We're not going to be able to be like yes, I can divine from your brain that you are this. I mean, it could be gray sexuality, it could be something else. I imagine introspection, kind of asking questions, checking out the definition, see if it feels right to you. It's often, I think, the case for a lot of us of how we figured out what we were. So, yeah. Good luck.
Generally speaking, I always tell people that it's primarily about whether you feel attraction in a sexual way towards other people or not. I mean, that can be hard for people to really sort of distinguish from other kinds of attraction. Like, for me, for a while, I had this sort of desire to do some kinky things, and for a while I thought of that as maybe it was sexual attraction, but I don't think it is. So it can be hard, but it's that sort of thing that you kind of want to focus on.
Yeah, it's kind of about. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It's about wanting and wanting, right? There's I want to be normal, or I want to have this idealized relationship, at least in the abstract. And there's realizing that you never actually wanted any specific person, or that you say, oh yes, I'm interested in sex, I would totally do that, but I don't want to devote any effort to doing, to actually going out and getting into a relationship or getting into a position where sex might be happening. There's always something else more interesting. And those are experiences that I've seen aces have. But on the same token, there's also, yeah, I find lots of people sexy. I totally would have sex if it popped up. I just have other things going on in my life, right? So that's something that there's an aspect of ace community that I've always really liked, a social norm that says you don't label other people. Even if they ask, you have to let them pick a label for themselves because you don't have access to all the information that's going on in their head. And for that reason, I'd be really leery of anybody saying either, yes, you're asexual, or no, you're not. I don't know what you want. But.
All right. So moving on, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about our experiences, like as aces.
Mm-hmm.
So starting out, like, how many of us like have coming out stories or self-realization stories? Mezakine, would you like to go first?
Sure. So yeah. Okay, being trans and ace meant I had the weirdest puberty because things were going on for everyone else that were completely foreign to me, and I knew something wasn't going right for like the same as them, and that baffled me. I was very, very deeply confused, and like I was just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just weird. And went that route. I dedicated myself to finding this thing because everyone's like, oh, well, everyone has a sexual attraction. So I'm like, okay, I will find it. I will go on the internet. I will look up every single form of porn known to man, and then I'll find the thing I'm attracted to. And turns out, no, there was nothing, in all the legal porn on the internet that I was attracted to. So yeah, and later on I found out why. I stumbled upon AVEN, which is the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, back in 2005. I don't know how, it was like 2 years after AVEN first got started. But yeah, then I was like, oh, that is me. Okay. And then I immediately came out everywhere I could. I think I came out to everywhere online. It's probably where I came out to everyone in Frangula. Hey, everyone. And then they were very supportive. I came out to all my friends. They were supportive. I came out to the person who was my ex. They seemed supportive. I came out even to my parents. And so my parents have currently mostly disowned me in this weird, bizarre limbo state, mostly for the trans thing. But I should have guessed that that would be a theme with them when I came out to them as asexual, and they would just go, weird, and then forget. And then I come out again and be like, weird, and then forget. And my dad would always do this weird hyper-heterosexual enforcement, like soon after I came out every single time, of like, see this, oh, Catherine Zeta-Jones, like, look, doesn't she look hot? Don't we all agree she looks hot right now? I'm like, no. Girlfriend probably would, because at the time I was dating someone who identified as pansexual. And that just made him angry and confused, which, again, is a running theme for our relationship together. But yeah, that was fun.
Elizabeth?
Well, I first sort of realized I was asexual in my late teens, and I was actually dating someone who came out to me as asexual. So from there I found AVEN, and then I came out to my parents. I came out to my mom first, and she kind of like just looked at me and was like, that's weird. And then she wouldn't really accept it because the person I was dating at the time was biologically female, but was actually trans man, and of course that was a big issue for my parents. And then I came out to my dad later on, and his reaction was big trigger warning here. He said, you'll change your mind the first time you get raped. So that happened. And then when I came out to my sister, she was just like, "Oh, you can't be asexual. Your relationship isn't real. You're just a prude," and so on and so forth. But then later, 3 or 4 years later, I think, she had a friend of hers come out to her as asexual, and then she sort of got it. So after that, she started accepting me, and then even exploring some of the terms we use in the community. When I came out to my friends, they seemed to be supportive, but later I found out that my best friend was going around spreading rumors that I had a crush on her, and I wasn't the only one, though. She also did this to a lesbian friend of hers and a bisexual friend of hers. I don't know what was up with that, but she was very... she's basically an abusive friend. She was kind of just using me because she expected that because I was asexual, I would be always available to be her friend. And then as time went on, I had better reactions from people. These days, if I tell people that I'm asexual, I generally get a little bit of confusion maybe, but they kind of shrug and are like, okay. Or people will be like, oh, I've heard of that before. So, I mean, in the past 10 years, we've come a long way. And I think that's it, really.
Okay. Erin?
Appropriate physical gesture of support.
Sorry, I was getting poleaxed. It's been 10 years, or almost 10 years, in my case. Wow, okay. Where are the people who told me I'd blossom into my sexuality now? Okay, so that aside, I'm a little bit unusual in that I was very lucky. I discovered asexuality was a thing when I was about 14. And I had been kind of going, something's not right. I don't think I'm acting with respect to dudes the way I'm supposed to. And did some Googling on a site called Gaia Online, and basically tripped over the term and went, ah, that sounds like me. But it's possible that I will develop attraction. And also, I'm 14, and nobody is going to believe me if I say this. Again, this was in 2005, when literally no one was talking about asexuality outside of a few very select corners of the internet. At least not that my, kind little 15-year-old self could have access to. And I basically went, well, okay, I don't want to date anyone, so the word's not important, right? I can just be myself, but since I don't actually want to date anyone, no one's going to care because I won't be dating them. So I can just be open about what I want and what I'm feeling, but just not use the word, and they won't have anything to get hung up on. As it turned out, this was not the case, because when you're a 15-year-old girl who's open about not being attracted to dudes, who's also kind of butch, wandering around through high school, people kind of go, ooh, there is a closeted lesbian. I will help her out of her closet. So my adolescence was punctuated with, from people at school, from friends, from teachers occasionally going, you have anything you want to tell me? I'll be accepting no matter what you have to say. You have any secrets you want to bear? You can tell me anything. And I would be sitting there going, you're not going to believe what I have to tell you. No, please just leave me alone. Throughout high school, I got pretty sick of this, as one might do. And when I got to college, I decided to start actively coming out as asexual. I figured late bloomer was probably not going to happen by then. And also, I just didn't want to hide it. I didn't want it to not be able to come up. Especially because in 2008, I started getting much more into the online ace community. And my parents had been inquiring about my potential gayness and basically asking, but then if you're not gay, then why are you dressing like that? I don't understand, and having increasingly frustrated, angry conversations with me off and on. And eventually, when I was about 19 or 20, I outed myself using the word asexual to them, which they basically went, as Mazikeen said, that's weird, and promptly forgot / brought up mostly so that my mother could ask me if maybe I would like to talk to the gynecologist and see if she had any suggestions, which, again, last time that happened was last year, which, given that I had not spoken to my mother in 6 months, is impressive. But, yeah, so they didn't take it super well. I actually used the sexual in a fight. When my mother found out about my partner, when I told her that we were engaged last year, the very first question she asked me was whether I'd been lying about being asexual for all those years. So, with respect to family, my experience is not so great. With respect to friends, considerably better. I've had friends who kind of went, oh, that's great, and were supportive at first, and then appeared to immediately forget, and friends who went, oh, okay, and then just kind of like didn't think about it. But I've also had friends who were genuinely supportive, a little confused at first, and checked in with me to see, what I was comfortable with and what I wanted, and had good conversation with me about it. And again, as Elizabeth mentioned, it's because you're reproducing asexually, Tristan. That's why. He posted to G-Chat saying he was not sure why he'd been cloned. What was my train of thought? Yeah, I've had good experiences. Oh, and as Elizabeth was saying, this has been increasingly better. It's been getting increasingly better and better with time. So that even if people still say dumb things when they find out that I'm ace, at least if they're liberal and generally plugged into queer stuff and things, they probably know that asexuality is actually a thing. So that is awesome. That is a huge improvement. I can't even begin to explain how amazing that is compared to when I first started to identify as ace. It's huge.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
good job, world.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. So I guess my story is last. So as I mentioned earlier, I went to a Catholic high school, which was actually all boys. So I was not attracted to anybody in high school, but that was not surprising to me, which is ironic because now I identify as gay. But so it wasn't until college, like actually a few years after college. And this is like several years after I identified as atheist, several years after I came out as atheist. I thought, wait, this is a thing. Maybe I should look it up. So I just looked up the word asexual, which was a word I had just made up on the spot. And then I found, the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, which was the only website around at that time. So after that point, I basically came out right away because I was closeted as an atheist for like about a year when I was a freshman, and that kind of sucked. And when I eventually came out, my parents were accepting, and my parents did the most important thing. So I pretty much just came out immediately as asexual, and my parents are fine with it. They don't really talk about it much, but I'm sure they haven't forgotten because they read my blog and I don't shut up about it. So anyway, so actually about 6 months later I started identifying as gray A. So if you're asking like what happens if you identify as asexual and you're wrong, well, I was wrong. I started identifying as gray A, and also I'm gay. And next we're going to talk about relationships. And this is actually kind of odd because in my experience in panels, usually I'm the only person in a relationship and everybody directs questions to me. And I'm glad that this is not true this time because my relationship is largely boring, just like, monogamous, normative, romantic relationship. So we don't need to talk about my relationship. We'll talk about the panelists' relationship.
Weaseling out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody who thinks their relationship is not boring? I mean, I was just gonna say, so's mine, and then I went, wait.
So tell us
yeah.
about your relationship.
Oh no! I was gonna throw that off at someone else. Okay, so I am in. All right, complicated because none of us can agree on what the hell romance is and what romantic orientation is, what romantic attraction is, and basically we're all in a state of cheerful agnosticism about whether this is a romantic relationship or not, but who the hell cares? But I am a committed polyamorous triad with one other ace woman and one ace non-binary person. We were very unlucky in that we met online and nobody happened to be not only in the same time zone, not only in the same country, but no two of us are, like, only two of us are even on the same continent. One of my partners is from the UK and one is from Canada. So we have a relationship timeline that's probably going to be measured in the order of years, like decades, as we try to figure out how we can legally all live long-term in the same freaking place. One of my partners, my non-binary partner who is Canadian, and I got married in Boston about a year ago because DOMA had gone down, and yes, we can access the immigration thing. So that's very excited. We are like 8 months into 7 months into the whole immigration process, which sucks and is boring elsewise. But yeah, is there anything else we're supposed to talk about? It's kind of weird being in long-distance relationships, especially long-distance relationships that start online. People can give you really weird looks when you talk about it. And then I basically produced this partner from nowhere because I'd gotten so used to not talking about my online polyamorous Canadian partner and also English girlfriend. That's not going to draw any butts of jokes at all. Actually, when my boss found out about Tay, my Canadian partner, he played the Canadian boyfriend song from Avenue Q at me in the coffee shop we were meeting in, which was really embarrassing, but also my boss is great, so, you know. But aside from that, I mean, dude, it's boring. We're people who like each other's company. We hang out all the time. We talk all the time. When we're in the same, geographical area, sometimes we cuddle. There's not, I don't know, I don't feel like it's super different, although that may just be my expectations being weird. Anyway, someone else go. Go.
Messaging?
So yeah, wow. I recently ended a 8.5-year long polyamorous relationship with my, essentially, I call them my ex-partner. And yeah, when we first started dating, it was like trying to figure out the whole asexual, allosexual thing, and I think early on she like fell in love with another woman, and at the time I thought I was a dude, so I'm like, but you're, and at the time she thought she was bisexual, so I'm like, oh, I want you to be able to explore this bisexuality, and I don't want to feel like I'm hampering you on your sexual attraction, we should be poly, and that worked really well, because not having that societal pressure to like fulfill sexual obligations, blah, 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 evil, evil, I could go on a rant, really freed me to actually explore trying out this sex thing and seeing if there's anything fun in it. And it turns out, yeah, it's like a giant, crazy Professor Layton game. It's like the biggest puzzle game in the world, and if you hit all the pieces correctly, then the person has this amazing, wonderful experience that fills them with all this joy, and you're like, boom, I caused that, yes, go me! And that was a thrill. And I was able to try out a lot more things because I knew if I ever didn't feel like it or I was the thing, I could just be like, well, you have fun with your other partners with that, bye, and walk out the door. So for a long time, our relationship was like that, where she could explore other people, and I would just be like, you know, having fun teasing her before she left the door. And then 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, I got myself a girlfriend as well, and we're still together, and that's awesome. And we had this kind of lovely dynamic all together. They weren't with each other; it was entirely a V. And my ex had her own additional partners going on as well. So yeah, and she's really nice. I really like being with her, and I'm hoping to eventually get some play partners because the whole kinky thing and whatnot. But yeah, unfortunately, the ex relationship didn't turn out to be entirely healthy. She was a little abusive, and she apparently didn't think we were a real relationship because I was asexual, which was fun to find out 8.5 years later. But I guess it sort of fit with everyone's ideas of what our relationship was, because my family also was extremely dismissive of like, oh, you ended your 8.5-year relationship. That's just like you ended a week-long fling, and refused to treat it on par with like an actual divorce in any way. So yeah, less boring stories, or less horrible stories, hopefully.
Okay. Hold it if you'd like to go.
Well, as I mentioned, I had dated an asexual trans man for a while in my late teens. And sort of what the kind of trouble we ran into with that relationship was that we were monogamous, and he would tend to get jealous a lot. We were in a long-distance relationship, so well, really neither of our needs were sort of being met. So I just decided when I went into my next relationship that I would look for somebody who wanted to be poly. And I eventually found a person who was willing to date me and be poly, and she and I have been together for over 6 years now, and it's going pretty well. Great, actually. We're actually thinking about getting married soon.
Hey! Congrats!
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting because like for a long time she would be very interested in dating other people, and she did a lot of that. She just, you know, not really anything too serious, mostly just kind of going out on dates with other people, but now she has kind of lost all her interest in that, and she's like debating whether or not she's aromantic. So now I'm the one who's more interested in dating other people than her. However, I live in the middle of nowhere, so it's kind of hard to find people who are interested. Other than that, we're pretty boring.
All right. Thank you. So we have boring relationships. And so next, we want to move back to, we talked a lot about our experiences, but we want to move back to, like, you know, something more related to atheism. So I was wondering, like, just generally, what sort of reactions have you gotten from atheists? Anybody? Nesky?
I guess, yeah, I'll start, because I probably have a large number of positive ones, actually. I'm pretty sure Frangula was the first online community I came out to as ace. It definitely was the first one I came out to as trans. But I'm pretty sure it was also the first one I came out to as ace. And, yeah, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. And, yeah, for a long time I was the only ace in the common threads of the places I read of various feminist blogs and atheist blogs, and like liberal snark blogs, and eventually I started actually spotting other aces, and that was awesome. And so yeah, I've had good experiences from the more feminist identified asexuals. Of course, the douchebag brigade is the douchebag brigade. They're douchebags. So, but I think my story's boring, so you all.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to go next because my story is somewhat similar in that I mostly connect to the atheist community through blogs, and I read, several free thought blogs. I've read Fringula since when it was on science blogs, and I largely have a positive experience as well. I feel like it's getting better, like people actually mentioning it without being prompted, and I guess I've had a less positive experience on other atheist blogs where for some years I was reading Friendly Atheists and I always got so angry at the commenters, like on any related subject. But, whatever. Now I'm not reading it, so it's great. Okay, so anybody else?
Well, for me, it's pretty amazing that I'm involved in the atheist community at all, because the first openly atheist guy that I ever met was the person who assaulted me. So, his reaction when I came out was basically, after clearing up what asexuality actually is, it was like, you haven't met the right person. And then he tried to be that right person, and he went through the whole list of the things that you don't ever say to an asexual person, and then he made up some more. And throughout my what's the word? Just anytime we were communicating, he would be very just dismissive of me. Every time I would try to explain to him about asexuality and set boundaries, which were related to the explanation, I couldn't really set the boundaries without that. He would just ignore me and be like, "You're delusional," and then he would blame it on me not being able to communicate with him. So it was a very covertly abusive relationship that escalated into sexual violence. So that pretty much soured me on any sort of like in-person atheist community. I just don't feel safe there most of the time. But I eventually discovered like Skeptic and well, free thought blogs didn't exist yet at that time, but those bloggers, and this community has been way, way more welcoming. So I'm pretty happy about that. There's been so much progress made over the past several years.
Okay, Erin?
So it bears mentioning that I'm probably the person least plugged into organized atheist groups or organized atheist communities on this panel. I do read Fringula pretty regularly. I think I follow a couple of other skeptics blogs. I don't know if they get updated. I actually get most of my skeptics-related information either from Metafilter or from Tristan, whose blog, of course, I follow. But I do get to meet a lot of atheists through work. I'm an evolutionary biology graduate student, and evolutionary biology is has this very atheist-friendly culture, in my experience. And that's something I actually really like about it. And then, of course, I've also had atheist friends. I've had, oh, okay, sorry. Question, which I'll get to in a second. I've had atheist friends and coworkers and acquaintances and all that, and which is mostly where I'm drawing my experience from. And my experience is that they are no likely to be better than religious people are. They're not necessarily likely to be worse either, but there are some factors that I look for. Super sex positive, like the religious people are brainwashing you atheists can be considerably worse than your average Christian, but I'm sorry, I keep reading the comments, which I should not do. But yeah, it's a mixed bag. I don't think that that atheists are noticeably better or worse than Christians about dealing with this. Although I think that atheists as a community would certainly like to be better. Yeah.
Okay.
That was rambling.
Yep.
Okay. So somebody asked a question from the chat. Okay, this may be an inappropriate thing to ask, but does being asexual exclude masturbating? The answer is some asexuals masturbate and some don't. And we have stats to show that it's actually not all that different from non-asexuals, in that some people do and some don't. I don't know, maybe it's slightly correlated with asexuality. I don't know. So that's okay to ask on a panel, although it is inappropriate to ask otherwise.
And I wanted to say thank you for mentioning in your question that it could be an appropriate thing to ask. That self-awareness is something at least I appreciate.
All right.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to move on.
Okay.
But if you have something to say.
Not really.
Yeah.
I had an
Okay.
anecdote, but it wasn't particularly relevant. I mean, go ahead.
So we want to talk about a few specific veins of thought in atheism that are occasionally problematic for aces. And one of them is, all the hyperskepticism. Any reactions?
The ones who come at the hyperskepticism from a biology angle are the ones who get up my nose the most, generally speaking, because their knowledge of biology is frequently not nearly as vast as they think it is. So one of the things that I really focus on in my degree is sexual selection and courtship behavior in animals. And I also have a passing interest in what's the word I'm looking for? Sex determination. That's the word I'm looking for. And how sex determination evolves, and how different species manage sex. Basically, it's the thing I've been interested in for a very long time, and it's really fucking complicated. Really complicated. It is always really complicated. Evolutionary biology is complicated. You can totally... Asexuality is not precluded from existing because evolution is a thing. There are... Okay, I have just trailed off into rage. So somebody, I think Mazakine had a really good way of discussing this.
Yeah, hyperskeptics are hilariously annoying, and it's largely because they're just using skepticism of everything, including to basically cover their wounded pride. They've built this entire manifestation of I'm smart, I'm an atheist, I question things, and I know everything. And when the existence of non-privileged, of oppressed classes come up, it's like, oh crap, here's something where the oppressed classes know more than my experiences, because they know their oppressed experiences and they know the dominant experiences, and I only know the dominant ones. So it ends up just manifesting in this bizarre amalgamation of, oh, you're ace? Well, asexuals don't exist. What? You're trans? Trans people don't exist. What? You're a woman? Women don't exist. And, okay, maybe not the last one, but literally the other two and many, many more.
Isn't that what the red femme hyperskepticism basically is?
Okay, a little bit, yeah. But yeah,
Sorry, go on.
But yeah, it's just this kind of it's basically these wounded pride, these people who don't want to acknowledge that they're not as all-knowing as they think they are, and are hiding behind this way of going, well, no, I'm skeptical that you exist, and that makes me the most hyper thinking about things as all. And yeah, because they're incurious, because their wounded pride demands that they know everything now instead of learning it, means they're also, as you say, really, really ignorant about everything in basic biology, because biology, again, just like you, I could go on the rant about how it's all spectrums and diversity and cascade pathways, and I'm, suddenly it's 9:30, it's 8:30, and Siggy's tapping his watch, so I'll just say these people don't know things at all.
Asexuality in the classic sense totally evolves invertebrates sometimes.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to stop here.
The famous sheep study.
Capitulating.
There's asexual sheep. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, someone go before I go on to an exceedingly nerdy academic rant, please.
Yeah, so speaking of academics, you can actually find like lots of research on asexuality, and most of the researchers just sort of take it for granted because, I mean, I guess that's what, you would do if you're really taking a scientific perspective instead of just whatever I used to believe must be right kind of perspective.
But society wouldn't lie to me, right? Right?
But my half-remembered 9th grade biology couldn't be wrong.
I know.
Wait, that plants don't reproduce asexually. That's what I was told!
Oh, Elizabeth, stop us.
Please.
So, sort of related to this, we wanted to talk a little bit about this episode of House. Yeah. And so I guess House is sort of like an archetypical hyper-skeptical atheist. Well, and there was this episode of House where it was just a side story. There were two patients who were identifying as asexual, and so Dr. House makes a bet with Dr. Wilson and says, I bet they're either like sick, dead, or lying. And then in the end of the episode, he proves that one was sick, he had a tumor, and the other one was lying to stay with her boyfriend. And then he smokes like $100 as a cigar or something. I don't know.
The bet.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think we're supposed to have a link to some clips underneath the video. I'm not sure if that's appearing.
Then he threw us the door.
But you can watch that after the panel. And so does anybody have comments on this particular episode?
I remember you having good things to say, Erin, on this one.
I have a lot of bitterness towards the writer of the episode who came into the ace community, hyped up this episode about asexuality as though it was a huge favor, and then was very surprised when the actual episode aired, and the ace community went, "You asshole!" because she'd written this episode that sets asexuality up, lets a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily know about it know that this is a thing, and then says, but it's okay, because they either have brain cancer, or brain tumors, or they're just lying. And the lying woman, the girlfriend, made no fucking sense as an asexual woman. She didn't. Like, asexual, like, okay, non-asexual people in relationships with asexual people do not go, well, it's really important that I hang on to you, so I'm just going to pretend to believe whatever crazy thing you believe, and no sex forever. I'm totally down with that. Like, that is not a thing that happens. What happens is that, generally speaking, is that the non-asexual person will pressure the ace partner in some ways, especially if the ace partner doesn't have words for it, or in some cases gets much better about it through communication and things, but just straight up lying about what the non-asexual person does. I have never in my life seen anything remotely like that. I have, however, seen a lot of non-asexual partners come into ace spaces and go, so I think my partner might be asexual. How do I fix that? Don't. If it's such a problem, you break up. That's okay. No one will fucking judge you. Sure.
I'll judge a little for the fix comment, but that's about it.
Well, yeah. The other problem, and someone please interject if you would like to speak, is that The problem is not that House was skeptical. House is a jackass, right? That's integral to the character. House is not going to suddenly not be a jackass and be super accepting because they're a real thing that the writer likes. The thing where the show went badly, badly, badly wrong is that the universe the show is set up in, the show itself validates House being the asshole. It goes, but hey, he was right! They were sick or lying! And they could have even rescued that. House had to be right about the dude's sickness by not having the girlfriend be fucking lying at the end of it. Like, salt in the fucking... do we have a swearing thing on this panel? I forgot to ask.
Not that I know of.
Salt in the fucking wounds!
Yeah, dittoing that so much of they don't understand like allosexual asexual relationships at all. Like there is no allosexual period who's going to be like, oh yes, I'm going to pretend to be this horribly abused minority just to reasons. I'm going to get all that sweet welfare benefit that they must be receiving. You know, it's a lie perpetuated by dominant groups of, oh yes, oh everyone will pretend to be a oppressed group. It's like, no, they don't. Sometimes an oppressed group will pretend they're part of the dominant group because they're scared, because there's real danger in being oppressed groups, but they're not going to go the other way. And even if they did, they're, you know, the asexual community doesn't exactly go like, no, never use the S word, we shall never talk about the sex again, or sexual attractions. Like, we spend like so much time poring over sexual attraction and thinking about it and debating it and constantly going like, okay, so, you know, like trying to understand it on every single level and like, you know, like examining ourselves. It's the worst place for someone who's lying about their sexual attraction to hide, because it's just, there's always introspection going on around in these communities.
Yeah, there's always people making up words and categorizing people.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
Well, I think you mostly covered everything I would say about the House episode itself, but I would just add that, interestingly, after the House episode aired, and there was all this big commotion in the ace community about how awful it was, I got a Facebook message from the guy who abused me, and he said, oh, I'm sorry for my ignorance, like as if ignorance was the problem. Like if it was ignorance, I would have fixed that pretty quickly, but he wouldn't listen to me. So I guess that's...
All the physical gesture of support.
Thanks. Yeah, that's... But, I mean, it's progress, sort of, but, you know, it's still just not getting it.
Okay. So I sort of went out for a second there, so I missed the last sentence. But the next topic is another vein of thought that's coming into this atheist community, which is sex positivity. And we as a panel are we have mixed feelings about it, although let's hear the panelists speak for themselves.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. Personally, I identify as a sex-positive feminist, and I do a lot of sex-positive feminist activism. And it's largely because of the good aspects of sex-positive feminism. You know, I am a consent fetishist. If my greatest kink is definitely consent and, you know, respecting boundaries for reals and people knowing those boundaries and communicating them, and it infuriates me. A lot of asexual get trapped in these relationship dynamics of it, the way it is always supposed to be, where neither people acknowledge their sexual attractions and they just fall into it all romantic-like, and, oh, isn't that wonderful? And it's like, no, because you're not talking about what you want. You're not talking about what are no-go zones. You're not talking about what behaviors shouldn't be broached. You're not talking about what type of activities you want to do. You're not examining in yourself and what you want and what's actually going to make this relationship either romantic or sexual fulfilling. You're not even talking about what type of relation structure you want, and that harms asexuals in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I'm like, yes, all of you should talk. All of you should think about your sexual attractions. All of you should really examine this, because then you'll stop fucking us over. And yeah, I think that's a really big aspect to me. And I mean, sexuals are cute when they're adorable when they're in the throes of sexual attraction. I'm often a dungeon monitor at the local kink scene, and yeah, I mean, you see the little people and they're like full of like sexual lust, and it's like, oh, you're having a really good time. Good on you. And it feels really cool. But yeah, at the same point, there's the douchebag strain, because there's always a douchebag strain in everything. There's this douchebag strain that basically goes around and is like, oh, sex positive? That means you must be positive about sex, or you hate sex, and therefore you should be having sex, and everyone has sex, and doesn't everyone experience sexual attraction? And it's like, okay, no, 99% of people probably, but not everyone. And yeah, it kind of can be annoying, or in the case of people like Dan Savage, can be infuriating and horrible and actively harmful. So yeah. But on the whole, I liked it.
Okay. I'd like to interrupt for just a moment. So we officially have like 8 minutes left on this panel, but we're the last panel of the night. So we will potentially have extra time. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat, and we will have time to answer them afterwards. So continuing with sex positivity, we can go on. Ciatrix, you look like.
Yeah, I think I'm the designated counterpart with respect to sex positivity for this particular panel, mostly because my experience has been primarily with asexual communities, right? And where there's actually a lot of internalized community pressure at the time that I became active in the online communities, which was about 2008 on, to identify as sex positive, to present this very sex positive, sex is great, I'm part of this, like these are the good philosophies attitude. And the thing about sex positivity, right, is that on one hand it's a set of beliefs about sex, right? Consent is good, communication's frickin' important, we don't shame people for what they like in the bedroom, whatever you want to do, that's fine, we're fine with that. People should have access to birth control and reproductive control if they want it, all that great stuff. No problems with any of that. But sex positivity is an actual community, right, of people talking about consent standards and people who are talking about sexuality and how it should be negotiated culturally, and people are having these big conversations, right? And my experience with those big conversations is that they're not necessarily super welcoming to asexuals. And I think there's a tendency for some sex positive people to get kind of one true Scotsman-y about it. Like, I'm not saying that that's what you're doing here, Mazepine, but that, the non-welcoming ones aren't really sex positive, they're doing it wrong. And there's an element of truth to that, right? Because if you really fall true with if you really fall in with the philosophy that there's no way to do sexuality wrong, of course you think asexuality is fine and dandy. But at the same time, my experience with these dialogues and these blog posts, these communications has been that asexuality is generally like ignored or boxed off into a category. I remember a dialogue I had with one very prominent sex positivity blogger who at the time was passing around these 2 simple rules that basically were supposed to explain all of sexism, all of heterosexism, transphobia to an extent, like all of these different social panics. And he boiled it down to 2 rules, right? Men are not allowed to be objects of desire, and women are not allowed to desire. And I looked at these rules and I went, no, this is my experience, right? As a woman who doesn't desire, a woman who experiences sexual attraction, an asexual woman. I am not society's ideal, okay? That is not my experience. That is not in any way remotely accurate to the life I've lived. It cannot, like, it is more complicated than that. And he thought about this, and he actually did respond to the blog post I made in response, basically going, okay, let me revise that. The real rule should be, like, 1, men are not allowed to be objects of desire. 2, women are not allowed to desire. And 3, asexuals can't exist. And I'm like, it's still wrong. I'm still a woman. Your second rule is still bunk. And that's kind of the attitude that I've seen, right? Among quote-unquote better strains of sex positivity, this idea that asexuality is a real thing that really exists, and that we shouldn't, like, hate on the asexuals, but also that they're, like, over in their corner doing their thing. You don't really have to think about them or incorporate their concerns. And also this weird idea that asexuals are like the historical category X, right? That there's no bleed over, there's no spectrum, they're just this self-contained mass that we don't really have to think about or care about because we're over here focusing on people who have very different needs, which tends to result in things like incorporated models of consent that don't necessarily work for the asexual community. So with that respect, I have a few, not necessarily problems, but things that I think that the sex-positive community as a whole could do better. And I'm kind of the opinion that given that this is not a community that's really set up to pay attention to asexual concerns, doesn't really seem to be paying attention that I have seen all that much. I'm a little bit suspicious of this internal community pressure to all identify publicly as sex positive. Sound good? Or makes sense anyway. But
Yeah. So has anybody here experienced pressure to identify as sex positive?
No. Honestly, of all of my identities, I get the most shit from other asexuals. Because I'm an asexual who has sex, I've had the most asexuals be the ones who say, oh, you can't be asexual because you have sex, that you must be lying, you must not be right, how could you enjoy it? And that's deeply kind of ignorant on their part about what asexuality is and what sexual attraction is. But yeah, definitely there's a lot more pressure, I think, to go in other directions than overwhelmingly sex positive, or at least that has been my experience with the ace community for a very, very long time. To be fair, I'm an old tooth in this, and I've been around in it for a very, very long time myself. So yeah, the asexual community does tend to shift and grow because all communities shift and grow. It's social evolution. But yeah. Elizabeth, do you have one?
You guys pretty thoroughly covered everything, but I think it's worth noting that when I joined AVEN way back in like 2004, sex positivity wasn't really a thing. It was the opposite. Like, you were pressured to not like sex and seen it as like not really asexual if you had any interest or curiosity whatsoever. So in about like 2007, I think, there was a split between the AVEN forums, and there was a new forum that sprang up called A Positive, where people could go to talk about asexuality and sexuality and do it in a sex-positive way. And that didn't really last. I think that the mods stopped being able to moderate, so it switched. But anyway, after that, there started to be more of the pressure to be sex positive coming up in the communities. But before that, it was completely the opposite.
Yeah, and I do want to point in, because I totally forgot to do it in my comments, being sex positive doesn't mean you have to have sex. It's perfectly possible to be sex averse for yourself. Like, no, I know I don't want to have it, but you, go on, enjoy that thing. And really be able to sort of, support kind of the notions of, at least, whatever that means to that person for it to be sex positive. And it's entirely true to be the other way, where you personally have sex but are sex negative and, more conservative in outlook.
Yeah, and I do want to point out also that although I've been identifying as asexual since 2005, I actually didn't spend that much time in the ace community until 2008. And by 2008, there was definitely beginning to be this pressure. And one of the things that I noticed, I was on AVEN pretty actively for about 2 or 3 years, is that there's a lot of pressure to be whatever the ace community thinks will get people to accept us. There's a lot of pressure to be, like, to try and figure out how to present ourselves just right so that we can try to, if we're just perfect enough, people will accept us. If we're just intuitive enough, people will accept us. So I have absolutely seen asexuals who have sex, or asexual, especially asexuals who have sex for their own sake and not within the narrative of, I want to please my partner, come under fire in the ace community from people who are worried about what other people will think. I have also, however, seen asexuals who are repulsed by sex, or who are uncomfortable with sex, or who do not want to have sex under any circumstances for themselves and won't, like, quote unquote, try it, come under fire in the ace community. And I find that ace communities, especially AVEN, for whatever reason, tend to go in cycles between which group is being pressured. First, it's aromantics who are, too cold and unfeeling, and they're the stereotypes, like, they're too threatening, so we want to, like, have the romantics in the hot seat. And then romantics aren't really asexual because the true asexual does this, and asexuals who are interested in having sex themselves are not asexual enough, or asexuals who don't. So, yeah, that's it's complicated. Yes.
Can I totally answer this question over here in the sidebar?
Can I interrupt though? Okay. So I forgot to mention before, if you want to ask us questions, you can go to the chat, and the chat you can access by tinyurl.com/FtBCon, and we'll be here for up to the end of the hour if we keep on getting questions. So here's a reader question. A question from the chat. I admit I am confused that if someone is asexual, if you are having sex or have sexual attractions, why are you considered asexual?
I would love to provide an answer to that.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So sexual attraction, i.e. lust, i.e. being sexually attracted to other people, wanting them sexually, is not the be-all, end-all of what it means to have sex. You can have sex for reasons that are completely, have nothing to do with sexual attraction. You can do it for emotional reasons. It can be very awesome emotionally to do something to a partner that makes them feel amazing. I mean, you did that. Congratulations. You are the king of King Mountain. And that feels awesome. You can gain something emotionally from having, like, just an aspect of sexuality kind of connect with you. I have certain acts that are very euphoric for me, that resolve my dysphoria, and it's not sexual attraction. It's not even really sexual, but it feels really good because it resolves this deep and abiding, like, need I have. Additionally, it can be intellectually interesting. I mean, human body is fascinating. It can do all sorts of cool, weird stuff, and it's really intellectually interesting, at least to me, to kind of explore and sort of know, especially if there's no pressure, especially if I can be like, oh, wow, this, no, not for me, fling, go find another partner. Yeah, I can just be sort of like the archaeologist going into the cave and going, yes, I'm Indiana, I am, I am Pollyanna Jones, and I will explore this cave, and you know, see where that leads, and see if it's anything that is there for me or not. There's also somatic healing. A lot of it's a big word in the kink scene, but it basically means some horrible things happen to people, and sometimes a sexual act or a kink act can provide a sense of healing from that, can provide a way to regain control from a situation where you were robbed of control, and so on and so forth. And that can be super important. And yeah, I have explored all of that, and I've also never experienced sexual attraction in my life, and I went looking for it. I went out there. I went out to the internet. I looked through all the porn. I, constantly tried to see. I constantly was second-guessing myself. I was constantly going, I am open and totally accepting of any sexuality that comes my way. And you know what? It would have made my life a lot easier to find that. But at the end of the day, I have never experienced sexuality. I have never experienced sexual attraction to anyone. I've experienced romantic attraction. I've experienced emotional happiness. I have experienced intellectual connection. I have experienced somatic healing. I have experienced great kink scenes, and I have experienced great sex, but I've never experienced sexual attraction in my life.
Okay.
Can I also chime in with one little addition to that?
Yeah.
So, about 7-8 years ago, a couple of researchers decided to sort out why people have sex by going out and asking people to list reasons that they personally have had sex, or that they think people have sex. The list did not consist of one or even 10 variations of, I was attracted to that person. There are actually 237 reasons they got out of people. Things like, I wanted to please my partner. It seemed like the natural next step in my relationship. I wanted the experience. I wanted to feel loved. It was a special occasion. Someone offered me money to do it. This has been frequent reasons, but I was curious about my sexual abilities. There's a lot of reasons people have sex. A lot of reasons. Attraction is not the only one. I think that's what people tend to miss out on when they're talking about asexuals who have sex, especially when they're talking about asexuals who have sex outside of the narrative of, I want to please my partner and I'm basically compromising by trading sex for love, which is it's more complicated than that. But yes.
Okay. I have something to add as well, which is so I'm gray A, and part of the reason I identify as gray, not everybody's reason, but the reason I identify as gray is because sexual attraction is such like a vague term to me. I don't really know what that means. So I'm like, I've been in the asexual community for like 5 years, actively blogging, and I still don't know what this means. And to some extent, it doesn't really matter because there's a set of people who will find some use out of the asexual community or identifying as asexual, and there's some set of people who could say that they don't experience sexual attraction, and if those sets aren't identical, then maybe there's some people who experience sexual attraction and who find the community useful. Like, that's fine. I mean, it's just a definition. The definition is basically a historical accident. So I basically encourage people to just do whatever works for you, and that's pretty much fine with me. If somebody, I don't identify as asexual, partly because I feel like I experience some sort of sexual attraction. But if you experience, low levels of sexual attraction, you may still find the identity useful. That's all I have to say.
I wanted to add one quick thing, and then I want to make room for Elizabeth, and that is, I am very scientifically minded, as you might have guessed from my going through all of the porn on the internet story. So yeah, I have asked a lot of sexual people what sexual attraction is, what they experience. I have grilled them on it, and it's sometimes hard for them to get a straight answer from them because it's so assumed to be just this natural, don't even think about it sort of thing. But everything they have described as being part of sexual attraction is like, cool, I have never experienced that. That sounds cool. That sounds wonderful. I'm glad you can. And I've seen people in sexual attraction, and I can see with my own eyes that that is something that I don't do. That doesn't happen when I'm having sex. That doesn't occur to me. I think, yeah, like, you know, it's not like I'm just sort of like going, well, I just want to keep my precious flower virginity safe, you know, of my purity. It's, no, I'm a dirty, kinky slut. I just haven't experienced sexual attraction. Elizabeth?
Well, I think one other thing that's worth talking about is the idea of responsive desire. I experienced that, and it's basically, it's not based on sexual attraction. It's sort of based on, like, when you get into a sexual situation and you sort of just start doing it, then you get into it. But before that, you have no interest in doing anything sexual. Like, I don't see people and just go, oh, you're so hot, I would like to have sex with you. That sort of thing just never happens to me. But, and for a while I was identifying as gray asexual as well. But I think what changed for me is realizing a couple of things. Like, first of all, I think I mentioned earlier that I have some interests which are kind of kinky, but it's basically just pure sadism. It doesn't feel sexual to me at all. It feels like people sexualize it, but in my experience, it's not sex. But for my partner, it is sex, because she feels it as a sexual experience. So in that way, we're sort of able to compromise, and I always am really careful about the term compromise, because typically people will come in and say that compromise means that the asexual person has to have sex, and that means that they have to compromise their boundaries. But when I use that term, that's not what I mean at all. I mean that you go through a list of, I can do this, I'm totally okay with this, this set of things is a maybe, and these are my hard limits that I will never do. And you compare that list and find something that works for both of you, that is not on those hard limits.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Okay. We can move on from this question though. So, well, one question is, what can people in the atheist community do? Well,
Oh, no. So
people are still talking about this question in the chat apparently. So we can talk about it more if people are interested in it. So I guess I have something to say, which is that so we have a lot of panelists here who are, you know, at least willing to try sex to varying degrees. And this is not the norm in the asexual community. And I think there's actually a bit of selective bias in that the aces who are loudest and most like activists tend to be like more, you know, more kinky, more queer, more etc. Partly because as activists we have to interact with the queer community all the time. So the kind of people who want to do that are the kind of people who are queer. or who think of themselves as more queer, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely got into ace activism and basically being loud about being ace before I figured out the gayish thing. Like, you were around for most of that, Tristan, but
You didn't talk about all the personal details all the
no, I
time.
don't particularly want to get into the personal details, but I think that the heteroromantic people tend to be very quiet. But I would say that, especially right now, there's a fair few people who identify as repulsed, getting out there and talking more. And I think that it's not just kinky, sexist, great aces. Although maybe there's disproportionately kinky, sexist, great aces out there being activists. So maybe you're right from that extent. I don't know.
I think activists are activists. Some have more normative experiences, some don't. And I think our community has a lot of wonderfully queer, non-normative individuals because those are usually the first to appear in any minority group. The most non-normative are the ones who are probably doing the most self-examination already. If you're already looking deep in yourself to see if you're trans, if you're already looking deep inside yourself to figure out what your sexuality is, or like what your, place in the world is as another oppressed group, you're more likely to be like, oh, hey, look what I found. Hey, everybody, did you find this thing? And yeah, I think much like all the other oppressed groups, I imagine we'll grow our own version of Geo-Proud or, so on and so forth eventually. But that's probably going to be in 50 years when I'll be sort of an old bomb thrower.
I would argue we kind of have them, but they're all on Aiden, and they never really come off.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying they haven't organized to that level.
Yes, they tend to be really apathetic about actual organization, in my experience, and more, you're doing it wrong, but I don't want to actually do anything, so I'm just going to yell at you and say, you're doing it wrong.
And then they throw their fedoras in the air.
I guess these are the kind of people who feel like, well, we get that you're asexual, but why do you have to talk about it?
Ooh, there's an interesting one over here.
Yes.
Okay, the question is, care to talk about sapiosexual, being sexually attracted by knowledge itself, or at least expressing sexual feelings as a mental exercise?
I think those are two different things.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, we'd think that there are many different shades of everything.
It's complicated. You have to be precise. I will say that I am rather uncomfortable with sapiosexual as an identity because I think that the things that get coded as quote-unquote intelligence get rather stereotyped and have a lot of class baggage. And that I also tend not to see it associated with what I would actually argue is what intelligence is, which is a propensity to learn, right? People are talking about skills when they talk about sapiosexual. But skills aren't intelligence. Skills are like talent plus practice and work. You learn those things. So, I don't know. I am a little bit uncomfortable with using sapiosexual as an identity.
I've actually seen sometimes sapiosexual defined as attraction to minds versus bodies, like that there's a certain personality type that really turns their crank, a certain sense of humor, a certain like activism, and that's just like, oh yes, that's hitting all my buttons. And I think that's sort of how I've seen it in other places defined, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I've got issue with.
But yeah.
I've definitely seen people use it as I'm only attracted to smart people. At which point I kind of look at them and think, okay, so who's attracted to dumb people? Like, is that kind of what you're implying there, or I don't know.
Republicans?
For me, I've always kind of been like confused by the term sapiosexual, and because I feel like like that sort of concept that it expresses is already expressed by sexual attraction, because it's not necessarily just physical, you know. But I mean, for other people, it could be a term that's really useful.
Yeah.
So.
I can kind of see it as like a subset of being pan. But yeah.
Okay. Another question. What does IRL asexual activism mean? Is it more than just making people aware of the identity?
Actually, my own personal in real life activism has zilch to do with awareness right now. I'm focusing all of my offline energy into offline community building and trying to build a, for lack of better words, community centers for asexual people via Meetup. So get asexual people in my city together and talking to each other and being able to access each other as friends and possible support system members and all those things that I find that a lot of asexual people are really seriously lacking. Sometimes we handle questioning people and offer them a place to kind of talk about what they're feeling in a place that's not going to judge them no matter what they come out with. Sometimes we serve as a source of support. A lot of the time we serve as a place to show up and joke about nerd things. But most of what I'm doing right now is just trying to get an offline space, an offline community going. And I would like to be more successful at that than I am, but you know, these things take time. And I've been working on it for a while.
Yeah, I like to say that the ACE community has historically been very, very internet-based, sort of like the atheist community, actually. And you know, for many years there weren't very many offline groups. I didn't meet any offline groups for like 3 years. So I guess my activism was many years ago. I was by myself doing workshops for LGBT conferences for like college students, and right now I'm actually kind of sick of that. So this may be one of the last panels I do for a while. And now I mostly focus on online activism. I know the question was about IRL activism, but I mean, so a lot of activism is really community building. Like I run this blog, and that's like really important. And I also volunteer for this community survey. So I do activism by looking at, I learned how to program in R, so I could do activism.
Yeah.
Other answers?
I do a ton of in-real activism for asexual community at the moment. I basically created and currently lead a asexual group at a college that I was already doing mentoring work for the trans community there. I do a lot of mentoring work for asexuals to talk about the issues that just they don't have anyone who understands, who doesn't just like dismiss it or like, you know, just sort of go or just say something deeply ignorant, someone who like gets it, who can kind of listen. I've been like keeping asexual people I know kind of alive through really bad depressions. I've you know, helped people like I've got one friend who I'm basically helping work through their demi, and one of the only people they've ever fallen in love with in their life turned out to be a complete douchebag, and kind of working through that experience and who gets it at that level. So yeah, I think that's what, and I've been doing a lot of stuff on asexuality and sexual violence. Is, you know, trigger warning on that, but it's kind of a lot of my focuses on kind of trying to pull together more things on that and try and, you know, maybe try and get some numbers, maybe try and get some more of our experiences out there, try and get some more of our non-normative experiences out there. I'm kind of pulling stuff together about writing an asexuality and kink book, and kind of doing preliminary work on that. And I think, yeah, there's a lot because there's not much in real life. There's not much offline. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to build.
So much to build. Elizabeth, did you?
I used to do like panels and workshops and that sort of thing with my at school, basically with they had several different queer student alliance type things. But I've sort of withdrawn from most of that, and partially it's because I don't live in a place where there are a whole lot of people around who are asexual, but I think that you can do IRL asexual activism by doing smaller acts and not necessarily like forming a meetup group or something like that. Like, for example, this book, The Invisible Orientation by Julie Sandra Decker. I don't know if you guys could see it on the video, but if you take that around to local libraries and request that they add it, that's a good form of IRL activism, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that actually writing such books and creating media representation, creating stories, that's another very important form of activism. Because we were talking about that house episode. That was like one of the biggest representations of asexuals in TV shows. Like, we can literally count on our fingers how many there have been. And most of them have been just little mentions. And that's like one of the biggest. And it's so negative. Like, anything we do, like, semi-competent will improve on what we have.
Yeah. And one of the things that I also kind of want to point out is that knowing that asexuality exists among my friends, among my family, that gets me fucking nowhere. The thing that I want people to understand is what it's like to be asexual, right? And how to relate to me as an asexual person. And I think that we've done actually really well in the last 10 years about getting people to go, oh, asexuality, that's a thing, and giving like a pat definition out there. What I don't think has really sunk into the broader consciousness as well is what being asexual means, what that experience is like. And, you know, the issues you face being asexual, the background radiation of invalidation, the internal pressure to try to be accepted all the goddamn time. Things like, I know a lot of asexuals who have baggage around queer spaces because there's a lot of online controversy about whether asexuality counts as queer, off and on. And I would like people to be aware of that more than I would like them to be aware of the fact that people exist who do not experience sexual attraction. And so on that point, I think we have a long, long way to go. If I was doing more offline education research, or not research, education work right now, that's where I would really prefer to be heading.
Yeah, what the microaggressions are that are specific to the ace community, yeah, is huge and is often ignored. And there's a lot of background radiation we get as aces. Like my ex-partner being able to go, oh well, it's not a real relationship because it's asexual, and not even me not even knowing that for a long part of our relationship, and that's just something that happens. And there's also the token problem of for the longest time I was probably the only asexual a lot of people would ever meet. So I had to be the best damn representation of that. So it meant being the one who's polite and respectful for everyone's questions and whatnot, and be like, "Hi, I'm the best version," because now you won't treat the rest of the asexual community like shit when you meet them, and that's a lot of pressure to put on someone, especially if they're already being the token X for a bunch of other identities.
It is really, really draining to always have to be educating people. It's just so. I mean, if people can get to the point where they understand it enough to go and start doing some of that educating for us, that would really take some of the burden off of us.
Yeah, I have had the experience of being dozing on a friend's couch while a couple of other friends chatted and having somebody out me to another person by going, oh, well, Erin identifies as asexual. She can explain it to you. And then having to go straight into educator mode, like from what I thought was relaxing. I have had coworkers, like upon finding out that I'm ace, in other contexts, immediately ask me if my partner and I have sex. I mean, people just default to these really quite invasive questions. They want you to put on your educator hat immediately because they don't know where else to go. And Jesus Christ, that's exhausting. And there's also pressure from within the community to be, and within ourselves very frequently, to be the best damn educators that you can ever be. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like there's a lot of this pressure to be perfect all the time, even when perfection is not actually possible. Because, you know, we're human. I'm a person. I say stupid shit sometimes.
We're human? I thought we were all perfect robot beings from space. Who are part bacteria.
Meat more, yes.
Beep, boop. I am a robot.
Meat.
I am programmed only to lack sexual attraction.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? I feel it's been a good conversation. It's been.
Yeah.
We could sit series of questions.
Yeah. Well, we only have 8 minutes left, so.
Let us fill it with things. Must pack every second.
They have all this time.
All the time in the world now.
I'm actually very proud of myself with respect to my offline meetup. I have now scheduled something to do that's not our weekly come to a coffee shop, sit and talk to aces. So there's like a learn how to do fiber craft thing at my apartment tomorrow. There's we're all going to go to a local queer nerd con together. There's a I forget all what else, but there's like one cool thing a month to go out and do for people who prefer to do that than just like sit and be stared at and go, you're the new ace. Tell me about your life history.
Tell us now. Tell us now.
Since we're coming up on the end of the panel time allotted, I'll give you a chance to give quick plugs to anything that you guys want to get out there as far as links. I've been adding links as people have been posting them in the chat associated with this, so they should show up on the event page. But if you guys wanted to plug anything, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, I've been tossing links in as things that make me think are relevant popped up, but I think that's just me. Well, and Tristan.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything else to add right now. Does anybody else? Nope.
Did anyone throw in the sheep study?
Ooh, no, I'll find the sheep study. Hang on.
It's the Journal of Animal Science, 2006, J.N. Stelflug.
What, do you remember anything about the title?
Yes, I'm just going to copy that whole title in.
Perfect. Oh, is it Perkins? It's not Perkins.
Nope, this one.
Alright, give me a sec.
I will make sure that these studies get put into the event page too.
Because science is fun. Got it. Ooh, and there's a publicly accessible HTML.
Yeah, but yeah, because there are animal versions of all of the things the Fedora Brigade tries to argue is, non-existent. Oh, yes, gay people don't exist. That's why there are gay animals. Oh, yes, trans people don't exist. That's why there are trans chickens. Oh, yes, aces don't exist. That's why they're ace sheep.
Dude, gender and sex and evolution of sex in animals is so freaking cool.
Yeah.
Gynandromorphy came up in birds. Have either of you encountered that?
Diandromorphic, is that the one where they have a possibility of producing testes and Obese?
No, so this is a thing that occasionally happens in birds and sometimes also in butterflies, where you'll get a disjunction of the W chromosome. These are all ZW species,
Oh.
and half of the animal develops as female and half develops as male, and they'll be just split right down the middle. And you can often see these like really, really amazingly uh,
Cool.
extreme differences between the quote unquote male half and the female half.
Cool.
Does anybody have any last comments that we want to leave the viewers with?
Not really.
We've already said it all.
Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for listening. I haven't actually read any of your chat, so I'm going to assume that you were all awesome. But it does mean a lot to us that people listen to what we're saying and think about it, or at least to me, anyway. Because I've run into a whole lot of people who hear that I'm ace and then go, "That's nice, don't care," and that's honestly about as disheartening as it is to run into somebody who's like, "No, you're not," because it's an important part of myself that I'm talking to people about.
Yeah, and I'd like to give a shout out to all the aces who are watching, who I'm sure there are some, although I also haven't been keeping track of the chat.
All right. Well, in which case, if there are no other comments, I'm preparing to shut down this chat. The first panel tomorrow morning starts at, I believe, 10 o'clock. Let me double check that. 9 o'clock, it looks like. So at 9 o'clock there will be Understanding X Puzzles. If you'd like to join us then, that would be wonderful. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching.